300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. I have to ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game. I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you so much for joining me on a Monday morning, a jam-packed Monday morning in sports. A lot of news to discuss, from the Olympics to the NFL with Carson Wentz and his injury, the Lakers and CP3. Both of them have interesting updates coming their way. I'm going to touch on that. And even Novak Djokovic had an opportunity for history and perhaps might have squandered that opportunity. But we start in the NBA with some big-time news yesterday. Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers opting out of the final year of his contract, leaving the prospect open to him potentially leaving the Clippers in free agency. The reason why this is significant is because he said that yesterday he is willing and open to hearing pitches in free agency, which was not a sentiment that he was necessarily sharing earlier in the year. In fact, he said that he's expected to re-sign with the Clippers, but not on day one. Right? He said he will listen to other teams. And if we think about Kawhi Leonard, who he is as a player, this response and approach kind of perfectly sums up what we know about Kawhi Leonard and who he is. An unpredictable, little bit of an enigma, a guy that's more of a quiet, kept to himself, low profile type of player. And when we think about Kawhi and who he was meant to be, we think about, well, he was supposed to be the successor to Tim Duncan, to be the next soft-spoken and quiet face of the San Antonio Spurs. When he went to the Toronto Raptors, they offered him the country after he won an NBA title with the Raptors, and he fled. Then he bamboozled the Lakers, pulled the rug right from underneath them, and he signs with the Clippers. So loyalty isn't a superlative when it comes to Kawhi. That's not in his repertoires to be loyal. And that's not meant as an insult. That's meant to highlight that for him, the priority's never been about loyalty. It's about what's in the best interest for him. He's kind of one of these quiet puppeteers that prefers to kind of operate in a cloak and dagger manner from behind the scenes, from backstage, as opposed to being front and center. And so the reason why this is important is because it brings up the question of leverage. Who's got leverage in this situation? Typically, leverage is such a transient, such an ephemeral thing in sports. It's very fickle. One moment, James Harden and the Houston Rockets, all of a sudden, the Houston Rockets have all this leverage because James Harden wants out, but the Rockets don't have to trade him. And then the next moment, James Harden puts on a couple pounds, looks like he can barely get up and down the floor, requests a trade, and all of a sudden exerts this cumbersome pressure on the Houston Rockets to trade him. Teams know that they can lowball him, and the Rockets cave, and the leverage shift to James Harden with the Packers. One moment, the Packers have all the leverage after Aaron Rodgers had a few mediocre seasons by his standards. and they draft Jordan Love. The next season, he wins the MVP, and the leverage shifts to him, and they acquiesce to most of his demands. So leverage is a very fickle thing, and the interesting question is, who has the leverage between star athletes when the star athlete is injured? Because that's the situation here. All of this comes down to, and the reason why this is newsworthy to begin with, is because the injury is at stake. The injury didn't take place where Kawhi Leonard tore his ACL or partially torn his ACL. All of this would be a moot point. Because normally and traditionally, when a player sustains a major injury, suffers a major injury, the leverage is predominantly with the team, with the organization, because they really are the ones that are in control of this athlete's future, potential future salary. And most of the players don't want to risk losing potentially generational type of wealth, so they opt for a team-friendly deal. That's the traditional sense when it comes to leverage. But in this instance, this is one of those few instances where, to me, the leverage actually lies with the star athlete. Kawhi Leonard has all the leverage here with the LA Clippers, and it's not even close. This is a Clippers team that mortgaged their entire future to acquire Leonard and also to acquire Paul George. Kawhi Leonard put them on the clock and said, hey, I'm not coming here unless you get Paul George. And so the Clippers gave the Oklahoma City Thunder a huge haul. Let's revisit that. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, 5 future first-round picks, and 2 first-round pick swaps in the future to acquire Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, essentially, is what you gave up to acquire both of these guys. And so I don't want to hear about how last year, oh, well, Jonah, look how far the Clippers went without Kawhi. They did so well. Paul George was a great leader, yada, yada, yada. I don't want to hear that. The reality is the Clippers aren't going anywhere without Kawhi Leonard. If you think that they're going to trade or move off of him and be able to land some more talent that's going to make them relevant, you're sadly mistaken. This Clippers team has always been, in recent years, about going in right now, going all in right now. You think Steve Ballmer is trying to implode this roster, trying to blow up this roster and ship Kawhi Leonard because he doesn't want to potentially have to pay him max money after he tore his ACL? Steve Ballmer wants to win. Lawrence Frank wants to win. Ty Lue wants to win. If you want to win, you have to keep the star players around. Kawhi Leonard understands that, which is why he's opting out of this final deal. Sure, of course, obviously Kawhi Leonard wants the security. He wants the assurance of a long-term deal, of money that he can put right into his bank account right away. There's no question that's the truth. But conversely, it's also true that the Clippers understand where they would be on the totem pole, not just in LA, but in the NBA if Kawhi Leonard wasn't there. Because if you think that Paul George playing great for a 3-week stretch is sustainable throughout an entire regular season and even another entire postseason run, you're sadly mistaken. And Paul George, he proved a lot of doubters wrong. He stepped up. He was great this year in the postseason. But the reality is, that's not a sustainable formula to win long term. That's a sustainable formula to stay above average. But the West is getting tougher and tougher every single year. And so they have to make it. If you're Lawrence Frank, if you're Steve Ballmer, if you're the Clippers, you have to make it your top priority at 6 p.m. Eastern time today, which is when free agency begins. You have to be at this man's door with an offer ready right away. Don't give him time to hear more pitches, because I guarantee you there's going to be a long line of suitors ready to snatch him up if the Clippers don't give him a big-time offer right away. Kevin Durant, we saw how the Brooklyn Nets moved heaven and earth to acquire him. I guarantee you, if Klay Thompson, if the Golden State Warriors shocked everyone and made Klay Thompson available, he would be gone off the open market within a week. And this is a guy that tore his ACL and ruptured his Achilles. Does not matter. There are a few stars that continue to wield that power and have that leverage. Kawhi Leonard is one of them. If you're the Clippers, take care of this business early. Don't give him an opportunity to see what else is out there and lock him up, or at least sign him to whatever deal he wants to be signed at. And that's the bottom line. And this is what also is interesting about another player and another team with Chris Paul and the Suns, because Chris Paul also declined the final year of his of his contract and of his player option with the Phoenix Suns, worth $44.2 million, and he declined it. Now, here's the interesting thing about Chris Paul and the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are obviously optimistic that they can renegotiate another contract with him. It appears, by all accounts, that Chris Paul would prefer to stay in Phoenix. But I just talked about leverage with Kawhi and the Clippers. And leverage is important. There's no question about that. But there's one other superlative that's vital to NBA teams, and specifically to owners in all major sports, and in particular the NBA, and that's relevancy. If you're not winning, you want to be relevant. Jerry Jones with the Dallas Cowboys, since the Tony Romo days and beyond, his focus hasn't been on winning. His focus has been on the team and making the team relevant. Then all of a sudden this year, he had a change of tone. Why? Because he realized and came to his senses that, hey, you know what? I'm getting up in age. What I want to prioritize is winning a Super Bowl more so than just having a relevant and glamorous franchise. And so he was willing to bite his tongue and swallow his mouth and sign some of his key guys, some of the key cogs in the machine that he thought were integral pieces to their team's success. He was willing to overpay them to retain them. Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescott. Not to suggest that those guys don't deserve that money, because they do. But sometimes the owner has to be willing to fall on the sword when it comes to the finances and not be so frugal. And there was an interesting article that was written just earlier this year in March by the Tactician that noted and chronicled the most parsimonious and stingy NBA franchises in the last decade, spanning 10 years. And the team that finished second lowest on that mark out of 30 NBA teams, basically ranking 29th, just ahead of the Portland Trailblazers, was the Phoenix Suns. Was the Phoenix Suns and owner Robert Sarver. This is a guy who has notoriously been frugal with his money. He's been a bit parsimonious. This is a guy who, since he's bought the team in 2004, has been adamant about his refusal to pay the luxury tax. Since the Phoenix Suns drafted Steve Nash in 2004, they weren't willing to spend a dime. They were nickel and diming guys. And now you've got an opportunity with a player in Chris Paul. Say what you want about his age. Say what you want about what stage in his career he's at. This is a guy that led the Phoenix Suns to their first NBA final since 1993, their first playoff appearance in over a decade, since 2010. And when I think about Chris Paul and his other potential options, now that the Lakers have reportedly acquired Russell Westbrook, the Lakers are off the market, which was a potential suitor for him. But outside of Phoenix, there's only a few couple potential realistic options. You've got the Knicks, you've got the Heat, who appear set on Kyle Lowry, you've got the Celtics, and you've got the Mavericks. Those are really, and the 76ers, those are really the only teams that could potentially be out there for Chris Paul. And if you look at all of those options, the Knicks have to gut their entire team just to acquire him. And now you've got a future of Chris Paul and Julius Randle, he's not going to want to go there. The Boston Celtics are extremely thin when it comes to their depth and their bench, which is one of the characteristics that made the Phoenix Suns such a formidable group. Is that depth? Was that depth this year? So I don't think, you'd have to get rid of Jason Tatum and whoever else you would have to get rid of to make that work. Jaylen Brown, rather, not Jason Tatum. So now you have Jason Tatum and Chris Paul moving forward. That's not good enough. And his dogged and stubborn personality wouldn't work with the Mavericks and Luka Doncic. So that's out. The 76ers would actually be a great fit. I was just talking about this with some of my friends yesterday. The 76ers would be a great fit for Chris Paul and Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris and Doc Rivers again and Seth Curry and that team. But Daryl Morey would never in a million years trade a young Ben Simmons, who he views as a superstar, for an aging Chris Paul. That wouldn't happen. And then you're left with the Heat, who would also be a good fit, but they appear set on Kyle Lowry, trying to make a trade work with him. So the Phoenix Suns are the most viable option for Chris Paul, and he clearly wants to be there. And so the onus shifts to Robert Sarver, because at the end of the day, he has to be willing to bite his tongue and write a check to Chris Paul for 3 years in the $100 million range, because that's going to be the deal that he's requiring and that he's looking for at this point in his career. Perhaps you can distribute the money so that the bulk of the money in the contract comes within the first 2 years as opposed to the last 2. And you just swallow your pride and you say, hey, you know what? This is one of those rare instances where we actually had a tremendous season. This guy was instrumental in leading us, and we've never been more relevant in the NBA than right now. And again, as I alluded to with the Clippers, your leadership and where you stand amongst the rest of the teams in the NBA is such an ephemeral thing. It does not last a long time, and the West is getting much more difficult. The Golden State Warriors are not done this offseason. I'm sure they're primed to make a move. The Lakers have retooled, and so the West is not going to be easy. And if you're the Phoenix Suns, you're Robert Sarver. Do what you need to do. The man's earned it. He deserves it. I know the NBA is not about paying guys for what they've done. It's about what you think they will do. But this is one of those instances where it does not matter. Sign him to the 3-year, $100 million or $90+ million deal that he wants, that he's looking for, and just bite your tongue and move on. Because without him, we've seen what this Phoenix Suns team is. And don't get me wrong, Devin Booker is a budding superstar. He's fantastic. He's only going to ascend. DeAndre Ayton's only going to get better. Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges took major strides this year. They're going to come back next year with a lot more confidence. Cameron Payne is a viable backup point guard, perhaps with a larger role. He can also continue to elevate his game, but we've seen what this team is without Chris Paul. And I like Jay Crowder as well, who will still be around, but this team isn't going to be a realistic Western Conference Finals caliber team without Chris Paul. I don't even know if they're a Western Conference caliber team with Chris Paul this year. So do what you need to do. Remain relevant if you want a realistic shot, and just sign him to the contract and don't look back. That's what I would say. So transitioning to the Lakers, I'm going to touch a little bit more on the Russell Westbrook signing on Wednesday. I didn't want to talk about it too much today because there were so many other big storylines for me that I want to discuss. But I will say this. It is interesting how, obviously, when you've got LeBron James, the priority shifts to trading and acquiring veteran players. That's something that's been consistent with all LeBron teams. He wants veteran, proven, seasoned, and experienced guys on his team. And so that's why right now the Lakers are eyeing veteran guys, specifically Dwight Howard, Carmelo Anthony, and Andre Iguodala. Those are the notable free agents, at least, or at least trade pieces that the Lakers are targeting at this point as we begin free agency on a Monday. So when we think about the Lakers, first of all, this is a team that shot 30% from the three-point line in the postseason, 35% from the three-point line in the regular season, but their postseason production from beyond the three-point line was 15th out of 16 teams, 21st in the NBA. So we know what the glaring and obvious deficiencies are of this roster. We know that. It's been easy to chronicle. It's been easy to see from day one. For several years now, that's been the biggest problem. And so the three major problems for the Lakers, one that we just talked about is the three-point shot, is shooting beyond the three-point line, right? Is floor spacing. But two is playmaking, having a playmaker there to reduce the role and the burden for LeBron James to have to create for everyone else. That's two. And number three is having a little bit more depth, having a little bit more of a bench. So when we analyze all three of these potential targets, let's take a look first at Dwight Howard. So Dwight Howard, sure, he was a defensive anchor for the Lakers as a backup center when they won the NBA title. And to be honest, he was actually pretty important for the Lakers, kind of anchoring them a bit defensively with his length, disrupting shots, physical, getting in opponents' faces, eliciting technical fouls. That's what he was there to do. But the reality is, now that the Lakers have acquired Russell Westbrook, it's been reported that Anthony Davis is now more willing to play the center spot, at least for more minutes, for a larger bulk of the season and during games, which means that his role as a Dwight Howard defensive anchor, that's going to be limited. And so Dwight Howard no longer is the priority. The Lakers' defense was never the problem. It wasn't the problem this year. They ranked second defensively. It wasn't the problem last year when they won the NBA title. Obviously, he played a role. So defensively is where the Dwight Howard signing would have been beneficial. And while I'll take him back, begrudgingly, I'll take him back, that's not the number one priority. So Dwight Howard doesn't need to be the main targeted guy. So really, ironically, I can't believe it's come down to this, that I'm actually about to say this, but ironically, this decision comes down to Carmelo Anthony, who's a 37-year-old guy, and Andre Iguodala, who appears to be on his last legs. And the interesting thing is, between those two guys, the best fit and a perfect fit is Carmelo Anthony, which is a guy that we have ridiculed for his inability to shoot the three-point shot, and yet this year shot a career-high 41% from the three-point line in 24 minutes, averaging 13 points per game. And when we think about these two guys, let's also take a minute to say, okay, I laid out the three deficiencies on this team: the playmaking, three-point shooting, depth. Well, by signing Russell Westbrook, you've addressed the playmaking. And you've addressed a guy that can go out and carry the load for LeBron during regular season nights, during stretches of games. And now the focus and the onus doesn't solely shift onto LeBron to create for everyone else. Because even last year, as much as Dennis Schroeder at times showed some potential to create for himself and others, everything revolved around LeBron. And that's where he's had the most success everywhere he's gone, was in positions, was in situations where he was the focal point and he was setting up the offense. But he's entering his 19th season. He's entering the 19th year in the NBA. He can't be asked to do that. And so Russell Westbrook will take care of the playmaking duties. And in a way, he also kind of contributes to the depth and the bench, because now LeBron and Anthony Davis will probably have a little bit more energy and will be able to play larger chunks of minutes down the stretches of games, because you can rely on Westbrook to be able to carry the team a little bit more. So now LeBron and AD aren't asked to do as much. You've got a third guy to come in and be able to propel the team. It's like adding an additional turbine to a great gust of wind. That's what Russell Westbrook is. He is the ultimate turbine to a great gust of wind. And so that's what the Lakers are getting. So you're getting some playmaking, you're getting some depth, because now that's one less person that you need to contribute to the offense. And so really it's only, okay, the shooting. That's the biggest area that they need to address. And so that's why, as much as I love Andre Iguodala, and I have a lot of respect for Andre Iguodala, I think that he has an argument to be in the Hall of Fame. Not that I necessarily would vote him into the Hall of Fame, but he's got a compelling case. Obviously, LeBron respects him. The players would respect him. He's an NBA champion. He's an NBA Finals MVP. He hits clutch three-pointers. He's extremely smart and intelligent. So he can create his own shot. He can spot up. He's a defensive stopper. He's an athletic, long wing. So there's no question he would be a valuable asset to the Lakers, but he doesn't shoot it nearly as well or as efficiently as a guy like Carmelo Anthony, who, as I said, even at age 37, even after all the trials and tribulations, remember the times when he was linked to the Lakers with Kobe over a decade ago, that never materialized. And now this is a perfect situation for him because, again, he can serve so many roles for this Lakers team. He can be the sixth man of the year. He can provide that scoring punch off the bench to provide that depth, just like the Lakers would need. So when LeBron and Russell Westbrook or AD get a little reprieve, Carmelo Anthony can drop 13 points like he did last year in 24 minutes on 41% shooting from the three-point line. And think about how many good looks he would get playing alongside LeBron. And that's the other unspoken, kind of intangible trait that could make this such a harmonious match, is because you know how motivated he would be to play with LeBron, to play alongside LeBron. They've been lifelong friends. He's never actually played with LeBron James. That's something he's wanted to do. And now you'd have an opportunity to do it. I know he feels indebted to the Portland Trail Blazers in a way for resurrecting his career and giving him an opportunity. So I'm sure he would love to flourish there, which he's already done, and stay committed and loyal to Dame Lillard. But an opportunity to play with LeBron and the Lakers comes knocking on the door. Do you want to live in Portland or LA, which he already has multiple houses here anyway? I think it'd be a great fit. I think it'd absolutely be a great fit. And that's the guy. So of those three guys, listen, Lakers are in a win now mentality. And I think Carmelo Anthony actually would be a huge, huge chip to bring in. An absolute blue chip type of player to bring in, and I'll be curious to see if they can pull that off. So, want to transition to the NFL. And obviously, we're about a month away from the start of the NFL season, I believe. So the closer we get, the more football is going to be discussed. But I saw this news a couple days ago. I didn't get a chance to actually talk about this yet, with Carson Wentz and how Carson Wentz, the new quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts, he sustained a foot injury on his in practice on Thursday. And so initially, at the time, it was reported that he was just going to be out indefinitely. And then Ian Rappaport of NFL.com reported a couple days ago over the weekend that it might need surgery to repair the foot. And so Carson Wentz has come out and said he's hopeful that he won't need surgery, that just rest and rehab will be all that's needed to recover. So here's the one axiom that's used frequently in sports, and especially when it comes to the NFL. If you enter a season unhealthy or injured, you are exiting that season unhealthy or injured. You don't get healthier as the season progresses in the NFL. That doesn't happen. In fact, if anything, you're laboring more. You're dealing with more bruises, nicks and knacks, little lingering injuries that take true time to heal, but you never really have the time to recover. Rehab in the NFL is not rehabilitating till you're healthy to play, till you're healthy. Rehabilitating in the NFL is rehabilitating till you're healthy enough to get out there on the field. And there's a big difference there. You hear all the time about players in football, especially football, such a brutal, such a gruesome and physical, demanding sport. How often they're getting shot? They're getting shots before games. They're taking Advil and different pills just to get themselves onto the field. And so it's never about being 100% healthy, because they're not. It's about, are you healthy enough to play? And when I saw this news, this was absolutely devastating. This was absolutely disconcerting. This was unnerving and deflating. Not only as an Indianapolis Colts fan, but if you're the Indianapolis Colts, this is absolutely crushing news, regardless of whether or not he's going to come back 100% or that this is just a little blimp in the road. Regardless, this is terrible news, because I was extremely bullish about the Indianapolis Colts. I thought that this was a team that was going to contend with the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. I thought they were that good that they could reach the AFC Championship game and challenge the Chiefs to a spot in the Super Bowl. I didn't think they would beat the Chiefs, but I think that they could contend with them. I had them right up with the Buffalo Bills, with the Browns, with the Ravens, all those teams, if not a little bit ahead. That's how bullish I was. You look at this entire team from top to bottom, and I don't just mean the players. I'm talking about the front office. You literally look at every single position. Jim Irsay is a great owner in the NFL with the Colts. Chris Ballard, fantastic, really smart GM. Frank Reich is a brilliant offensive mind. Then you look at the actual personnel. Setting aside the quarterback, they've got a top 5 defense, an absolutely stout defense. Darius Leonard, DeForest Buckner, they've retained. Xavier Rhodes is still there. I personally loved their draft signing Kwity Paye out of Michigan. I thought he was perhaps the most talented defensive player in the draft this year. Certainly had perhaps the most upside and potential. Tremendous pickup. You've got one of the best offensive lines spearheaded by Quentin Nelson. You sign Eric Fisher, who, again, granted, coming off a ruptured Achilles, but when he does return, he will return and he'll be healthy and I think productive for this team. Sure, would I prefer that they had an A+ caliber wide receiver? Absolutely. But T.Y. Hilton is great. Paris Campbell, Michael Pittman Jr., Zach Pascal are very serviceable and talented wide receivers. Jack Doyle is a talented tight end. Nothing flashy, but a talented tight end. And who did Carson Wentz have the most success with the Philadelphia Eagles? Was Zach Ertz. So you know that Jack Doyle is going to get a lot of touches, a lot of production. I love their running back, Jonathan Taylor, out of my alma mater, Wisconsin. So it all came down to the quarterback. And whether or not you like Carson Wentz, and I know that it's a hot point of contention amongst a lot of NFL fans, amongst a lot of sports fans, but he's got innate skill. There is innate skill that exists there. He is talented and possesses certain physical traits that you can't teach or coach. He's 6'6" and athletic and has a huge arm. And we've seen him have success before. We saw him have success with Frank Reich in Philadelphia in 2017 when he was the front runner to be the league MVP, led the Eagles to 11-2 record in 13 games, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, above 60% completion percentage. He was having a great year, so we know that the talent does exist within him. But then you deal this huge setback, and I always thought that the Colts were just one really good quarterback away from winning the whole thing. If they had Andrew Luck right now, perhaps they would be the favorites over the Kansas City Chiefs. That's how complete of a roster and a team this is. So I don't think people understand the one position in team sports that you can't replicate and that you can't afford to have a deficiency at is the quarterback position. They are the lifeline. They are the oxygen. They are the oxygen that allows you to breathe. They are the essential organs in your body. Without it, you can't function. They literally touch the ball on every single offensive possession. Sure, the defense can play great, but you need to score. And so I sure hope that he doesn't need surgery. I really hope that that he doesn't need surgery, because if he does and he's out indefinitely, the fact that this happened in training camp before he could even get out and play a preseason game, let alone a real game, is just devastating. It is just devastating, and it's extremely daunting now. They're in a much more dire situation. It's very unsettling and very disconcerting if you're the Indianapolis Colts. And this was not the type of news that I was expecting or hoping to see over the weekend. Just terrible. So I want to transition to the Olympics, because it's been extremely fun for me to watch, not only with my family, but it is one of those rare times in sports where you get a chance to see more of the eclectic sports, get a chance to be introduced to athletes that maybe you've never really heard of or you haven't followed too much. But obviously tennis, as I've touched on multiple occasions, is a sport that I follow closely, that I care deeply about, that I play. And so whenever I'm watching one of the greatest players in their respective fields, because that's naturally what I do, I want to see how they perform. And so Novak Djokovic participated in the Tokyo Olympics, and he was upset by Alexander Zverev in the semifinals of the individual tournament. Obviously was vying for a golden slam, which is not only winning all 4 Grand Slam events, but also winning a gold medal at the Olympics, if it so happens that they coincide all at the same time. And so not only did losing to Zverev end that bid of a golden slam, but he also withdrew from the mixed doubles with his partner. He lost to Corina Busta of Spain again, with an opportunity to at least win a bronze medal. He couldn't do that. And it's not the loss that's significant to me, but it's what the loss represents and the style in which he lost that I think stands out. And this is why this is important to me. Because, first of all, for some context, this was the 16th set that he played in 7 matches over the course of 4 days. So when we think about what he's already endured this tennis season, had to play and earn a hard-fought championship at the French Open, the French Open title in 2021. Had to come back from 2 sets down twice at the French Open and in the championship game against Tsitsipas, who, by the way, was on a roll, and Djokovic became the first player to do that. To come back from 2 sets down in a championship game to win at the French Open. Then, and by the way, the timeline for that was the end of May through the middle of June. Then he goes to Wimbledon, which is the end of June to mid-July, early mid-July, and plays an entire tournament at Wimbledon and wins. And 2 weeks later, he's got the Tokyo Olympics, where he's got this collapse and this meltdown. And he's got the U.S. Open looming in a month. Now, he cited some injury soreness with his shoulder, citing some injuries that played a role in not only the loss, but his reasons to withdraw from the tournament. And when we as sports fans and as tennis fans think about different players, different athletes, we always talk about how did they look when they competed? How did they look? Because that's really important. And so Djokovic, when he lost to Pablo Carreno Busta, shouldn't abbreviate his name, for the second time against the same opponent, he destroyed 2 rackets. He threw his racket 5 rows into the stands. He threw his racket against the net post on a changeover after he lost the first game of the third set. And mind you, in the Tokyo Olympics, it's a best of 3. It's like a normal standard tournament as opposed to a Grand Slam, which is a best of 5. But when we reminisce about the greatest tennis players of all time, it's not just about the talent. It's not just about the accomplishments. We look at the fine print. We look at the minutia. We look at the character and how you won. We care about the optics. We care about the beauty, the grace that's displayed. Not just the tennis prowess, but your composure, your character. If you leave an indelible mark in our minds, the impressions that you leave matter. That stuff matters. And when we look at the greatest players of all time in tennis, the big 3 when it comes to the men's, with Djokovic, Roger Federer, and Rafael Nadal, those guys are so closely together as far as talent and accomplishments that we have to look at intangible characteristics when it comes to this. And this is the reason why so many tennis fans harbor this resentment towards Djokovic and feel this vitriol towards him and have this disdain for Djokovic is because of the character. And the one thing that you can say is the glaring weakness of Djokovic, which isn't something that you can say about Nadal or Federer. Those 2 guys have no weaknesses. On the court, the one glaring and flagrant weakness of Novak Djokovic is his emotions. Is emotionally. He will let his emotions get the best of him. It's cost him. We saw it within the last year. It cost him a U.S. Open last year against Carreno Busta in the 4th round of the U.S. Open. He was frustrated, turned, unintentionally hit a ball at a line judge in the throat. It cost him a Grand Slam. We saw it in the Olympics again. Cost him a gold medal. Cost him a medal in general, any medal at all. And mind you, Djokovic has only won 1 medal at all at the Olympics. It was a bronze medal in 2008, which is the only medal that he's ever won. He's allowed his emotions to get the better of him and sometimes stain his character. And that is the reason why so many tennis fans view him as the interloper. Don't revere him the same and don't kind of group him together with Federer and with Nadal and view him in the same light as those 2 guys is because for a lot of people, for a lot of fans and media members, it's not just about the talent. It's not just, did you eclipse Roger Federer's mark and Nadal's mark of 20 Grand Slams? Have you accomplished the same things that they have? It's not just about that. It's how did you conduct yourself en route to reaching that point? And unfortunately for Djokovic, he will probably surpass Federer and Nadal for the most Grand Slams. He's in better peak condition. He's younger. He'll have more opportunities to win. He hasn't been sustaining as many injuries. But that's the biggest reservation and point of contention that I have when it comes to just crowning him as the greatest of all time. Because while I don't think that beauty and grace are everything, you certainly have to have talent. But how you conduct yourself on the court, what type of person you are, the persona that you display, I think should be taken into consideration. And I love Djokovic. I'm a tennis fanatic, so I respect the hell out of him. And it's a bit of his kooky side and his bad temper and losing his cool. That's what's made him who he is. That's what's helped elevate him to the stage. But what's also helped him elevate and ascend is the fact that he was able to finally keep those emotions in check. He wasn't allowing those emotions to dictate how he plays and to cost him free points or free matches. And that's been why so many fans feel this vitriol and this animus towards him, is because they think that, unfortunately, the not so pleasant things that he does on the tennis court sometimes leave more of an indelible mark in people's minds than the greatness that he displays. And that should never be the case. That should absolutely never be the case. And again, you watch Federer, you watch Nadal. Every single match that they play, they're calm, cool, collected. Doesn't matter. In triumph or in defeat. And Djokovic, that's not the case. You get the mixed bag. You get the greatness, and then you get the volatility. And he's got the U.S. Open coming up. Obviously, he missed out on a Golden Slam. Still has an opportunity to complete a Grand Slam, which would be a tremendous feat that hasn't been done since 1969 by Rod Laver. But unfortunately, I'm not going to go as far as to say that this one Olympics stains my memory of Novak Djokovic, because it doesn't. But unfortunately, you can just add it to the laundry list and to the litany of other examples in which he's let his emotions get the better of him. And that, unfortunately, I think will contribute to how we view him moving forward. And it's a shame, because he's a tremendous player and arguably the greatest of all time. But he has to try and keep those emotions in check, because he's costing himself more accolades, more accomplishment. And he's also costing himself some favor amongst tennis fans along the way. That's what I have to say about that. Now, again, he said he's coming out. He's looking forward to the Olympics in Paris in 3 years, planning on playing in that as well. So he'll still have an opportunity to win a gold medal, but big time upset. And that's not to take away from Pablo Carreño Busta or Alexander Zverev, who I'll give a shout out to in my Malkin's moments for winning a gold cup. Not a gold cup, excuse me, a gold medal. But I didn't like to see that from Djokovic. But first, I have to switch to the U.S. men's national team in soccer. They beat Mexico last night, 1-0 in the 117th minute in the second half of the extra time to win the CONCACAF Gold Cup. It's their 7th title in U.S. men's national soccer team history. And we know that when it comes to the American soccer team, the U.S. men's national soccer team, especially in recent years, we haven't exactly been able to laud them or cheer for much. There hasn't been much to extol. We haven't been able to extol the American soccer team in recent years. We obviously remember 2 years ago when the men's national team, in my opinion, reached rock bottom, hit their lowest point, losing to Trinidad and Tobago in a World Cup qualifier. They lost 2-1. They did not qualify to make the World Cup for the first time since 1986. And that was the lowest point in American soccer history. That was absolutely the lowest point in American soccer history. And so for the first time since that moment, we finally have something to celebrate and to appreciate about this U.S. men's national soccer team. Because this was absolutely a monumental moment for this U.S. men's national soccer team. Let's first put into some perspective. I really like perspective. Mexico is the U.S.'s biggest sports rival when it comes to international soccer. We share borders. So there's proximity there. There is disdain among the fan bases. The fan bases despise one another. It's one of the longest active international rivalries in soccer that we have in the game, period. Mexico has won 11 Gold Cups. In fact, they were the defending Gold Cup champion in 2019. They've held the edge. They held the edge over the U.S. in 7 matches now, but at the time it was 6 in the Gold Cup final. They had won 5 of the 6 meetings prior to this year. We've played each other 71 times. They hold the advantage, 36 wins. I think it's 15 losses and 20 draws. So this was going to be the 7th Gold Cup final meeting. And all the history was with Mexico, except that this year the U.S. men's national team was starting to turn a corner. They started to take things more seriously. They beat Mexico in the Nations League CONCACAF final 3-2. That was when Christian Pulisic was with the team and scored the game-winning goal back on June 6th. And you fast forward to this, and now you got Miles Robinson in the 117th minute on an in-swinging free kick in the second half of the extra time, header in the free kick to win essentially the Gold Cup final for the U.S. men's national team. The jubilation, the relief to watch that unfold was beautiful, was absolutely beautiful to see. And it's just amazing because not only is this now their 7th Gold Cup championship, and they're first since 2017 because they've won 1991, 2002, 2005, 2007, 2013, 2013, and now 2021. But again, as I mentioned, this is the second time that they beat Mexico in a final within the last couple of months, which is noteworthy because, again, this is the biggest rival. These two countries, when it comes to soccer, do not have much love for one another, to put it bluntly. It's a bit more of an acrimonious type of relationship. We heard the U.S. head coach call out the Mexican team prior to the game, hoping for a fair game. There's bad blood between these two teams. And so you factor that in, combined with the fact that the U.S. was actually without some of their best players. They didn't have Christian Pulisic, and they didn't have Weston McKennie, among others, who wanted to prioritize their European seasons more so than the CONCACAF Gold Cup final. And in that Nations League match that they won a couple months ago, of that team, only 3 players were starting for this team last night, whereas the Mexican national team had 8 players from that Nations League final play and start last night. So they were underdogged. They were underdogs. They were undermanned. And They found a way to prevail. It was not pretty. In fact, Mexico dominated the majority of the game, with the exception of one shot that hit the post and a little 20-minute flurry in the second half by the U.S. Mexico was dominating this game. 64% possession to 36%. 22 shots on goal to just 14. They had 11 corner kicks as opposed to just 6 for the U.S. The U.S. committed 31 fouls. Mexico committed 20. A lot of the stats favored the Mexican team, but as I've said before, stats can be thrown out the window, and all that was irrelevant. And now they're just extraneous details, because at the end of the day, all that mattered is that the U.S. team converted on the opportunity that they had. It's never about the stats or the total number of opportunities you have. It's about, did you convert? It's about the conversions. Did you capitalize on those chances to score? And the fact of the matter is the U.S. did. And it was a huge moment for them that hopefully can spearhead them forward, that can hopefully propel them forward into a deeper World Cup run in a couple years from now. You add Weston McKennie and Christian Pulisic back into the fold, and this was one of the younger U.S. teams to play in the Gold Cup final. They've got a lot of promising players, and so I'm excited to see this team. I was excited to see them win. They won 6 straight games in this matches in this tournament. It was not a fluke, and it was very impressive what they were able to do. It was very impressive what they were able to do. So I now finally going to transition to my Malkins moments. Got a number of great Malkins moments for you. Always do. This one's special to me because, again, as I've talked about, it's a great opportunity for me to kind of shed a little bit of light into different athletes that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise always seen, especially with the Olympics coming on. So my first Malkins moment, let me first just say, big shout out to Kevin Durant, who just became the all-time leading scorer for the U.S. men's basketball team. He just surpassed Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony had the record of 336 points. Durant now is at 339 and counting. Again, what's impressive, too, about that is Carmelo Anthony played in 4 Olympic runs. Kevin Durant is just in his 3rd Olympics right now. Just further encapsulates the efficiency with which this guy plays throughout, and with which this guy has played throughout his entire career. It's extremely impressive. Shout out now to the Chicago Cubs, and specifically the players within the Chicago Cubs, Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, and Javier Baez, who were all traded at the trade deadline and all hit home runs in their debuts with their other team. Baez with the Mets, Rizzo with the Yankees, and Chris Bryant with the Giants all hit home runs in their debuts with those new teams. They became the first trio of players to start a season together, to be traded midseason, and in their first games, in their debuts with their new teams, hit home runs. It's never been done. It's never been done, and that is absolutely worthy of a Malkins moment. Want to give now a shout out from the Olympics to France's Jean Kwampo, who tied an Olympic record for the 25-meter rapid-fire pistol shooting event at the Tokyo Olympics. He hit 34 of 40 shots, which again ties the Olympic record. In fact, this is a guy that took silver in the 2016 Olympics back in Rio, Brazil. So hopefully I didn't butcher his name too much, but that was a major story. So big shout out to him. Big shout out to Jasmine Camacho Quinn of Puerto Rico, taking gold in the 100-meter women's hurdles event that took place last night. She actually upset the American Kenny Harrison, who was the world record holder in Harrison. And yet Camacho Quinn finished the race in 12.37 seconds. She won by 0.15 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in an event like this, it's actually a blowout win in such a short race. Again, that's upsetting the Americans' world record. Big shout out to Italy's Lamont Jacobs, who took gold in the men's 100-meter race. Normally the race to determine the fastest man on the planet. And he kind of came out of nowhere. No one was really expecting him out of Italy to win. Obviously, Usain Bolt holds the record for the fastest 100-meter race. Ran it in 9.58 seconds. And Lamont Jacobs ran it in 9.8 seconds. Extremely, extremely fast. Again, he captured his first ever 100-meter medal for the country, let alone himself, for the country. That's never been done before. So major shout out to him. And then finally, big time Malkin's moment goes to the American gymnast Jade Carey of the U.S. national gymnastics team, who won the gold medal on the floor exercises. She's just 21 years old, from Arizona, filling in as a replacement for Simone Biles, and not only holds her own, but shows out. And the medal is now the 5th claimed medal by the U.S. women's gymnastics team in Tokyo, and that is even without Simone Biles participating. Just shows the depth and how much talent that exists on this gymnastics team. And it was actually just reported and announced yesterday that Simone Biles will participate in the beam for the final competition for the beam exercises. So I'm thrilled that she feels like she's in a much better mental state. But big shout out to Jade Carey for stepping in, and not just stepping in, being worthy of winning a gold medal. That is absolutely fantastic, and thrilled to see. Well, that's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to like, review, comment, subscribe to my channels on YouTube, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter, Morning Joe, or just Jonah Malkin, or my Instagram, jmalk97. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.